counselor with Clint Davis at Clint Davis Counseling. And y'all give her a warm applause.
Good evening, everyone. Kelsey Petty here, Clint Davis Counseling. I'm a social worker. I've been doing that for about 5 years. I've always known I wanted to work with kids. That's what I do primarily over at Clint Davis is play therapy, working with families, young kids, adolescents, and some young adults as well. So me and my family moved here from the Midwest just over a year ago. My husband and I have been married for 4 years. He's pastored a few churches and overseen youth ministries, so we've always kind of been passionate about the bridge between churches, mental health, and where that meets. We have 2 spunky, beautiful daughters, 3 and 1.5, and they certainly keep me humble. Even as he was saying, you know, I'm going to come up here and give you some expert parenting advice. That's almost comical if you were to have seen my bedtime routine last night and how the chocolate milk was somehow spilled all over the kitchen floor. And trying to compose myself and my own regulation, I get to practice what I preach on a daily basis about how regulating our kids requires a self-regulated adult, and that's very hard to do. And I guess even with this conference, as we learn more information, the more we know about parenting and the more we know what we should be doing, the more grace we have to have for ourselves, because you won't do it perfectly. And you'll know up here and you'll have a moment that you won't do it right. Like I don't do it right. I have a master's degree. So when do we learn? We don't. We don't always do it perfectly, but it's progress over perfection. So in fact, when I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking about my own level of anxiety. Right? I haven't been on a stage in over 2 years. So I was sitting down there, I kind of picking at my finger, fiddling my thumb. My feet kind of are a little bit numb right now. My hands are a little bit sweaty, right? So there's a level of anxiety that I experience. So as I teach you about teaching anxiety to your kids, kind of processing what your own anxiety entails is really important in this. So like many moms in this room, you may relate to the fact that my brain feels like total mush at the end of each day. I might forget what I'm talking about mid-sentence, and so I have some pretty detailed notes here in case I get off track, but we will get to the end together. And if you do see me staring off into space, it's because at 5:15 this morning, my daughter wanted to know why the sheep on her bed sheets were staring at her. Quickly followed by, hey, do you know where my Easter candy went? And I thought, Easter was a while ago, babe. I don't know where your candy went. It's probably all gone. And she said, well, did you eat it? Or did you throw it away? And I said, I did not throw it away. And in my head, I said, I ate it. Yeah, I ate the rest of that. But, so all before the sun rose this morning, I had betrayed my children. And so I don't even know where I was going with that. Oh, my brain is mush. My brain is mush. That's where we're at. So anxiety. So destigmatizing anxiety is where I want to start. So there's 2 types of anxiety that we could be talking about tonight. One would be our typical human emotion of anxiety that we all experience. Then there's anxiety disorders. Okay, I'm not talking about anxiety disorders. There are people that end up in my office who feel like their kid or themselves has reached the threshold of what they feel is normal or typical or functional in their life. But the human emotion of anxiety is something we all experience. And we'll get to why God doesn't want that for us, but in general, we experience it in the midst of a pandemic. Our typical level of anxiety has all increased. So when Luke and Jason said, we need you to talk about anxiety because all of our kids are feeling it. They're feeling it. And I'm going to say, that would be an appropriate response to what we've experienced this last year. Because what is anxiety? Okay, the intention of anxiety, or what it is in our brain, it's an alarm system, right? It alerts us to potential risk. It alerts us to potential discomfort or danger. And so there is a purpose it plays to alerting us, but where we live in it and how we let it control us is the problem, okay? So it's not intended to be bad. It has a purpose to protect us. The problem, again, is when the worry or our reaction to that alarm is disproportionate to the danger or the risk at hand. And so there's 2 pieces of anxiety, right? There's the cognitive piece. There's our thoughts that spiral, that tell us a story. And then there's a physiological response. So when I say my hands are sweating, that's the physiological response to a risk or a danger. And so tonight, so we'll use this example. Tonight, what's the risk for me? If I'm having anxiety, I'm feeling a little nervous about getting up here, talking to y'all, the risk. Cognitively, the risk is you think I don't know what I'm talking about, right? You think I'm an idiot. You think I'm incompetent. What is she talking about? She doesn't know what she's saying. That's the risk. Okay, that would be uncomfortable if someone came up to me in the parking lot and says, you're not cut out for speaking on stages. Well, that's not what I get paid for, so thank goodness. But I mean, that's the risk, that you would judge me, or that if you judged me, that would make me uncomfortable. Okay, so that's a possibility, right? We're not risk, or the risk is an actual possibility, but what does that mean? If you thought that of me, if this went horribly wrong, what does that mean? Does that mean I can't be a good counselor? Well, no. Does that mean I'm not valuable? Well, no. Does that mean I don't bring anything to the world or to families? Well, no. And so once you bring that thought through to its end, you can speak truth to it. So what anxiety does, it exacerbates the lies that we tell ourselves, these lies or these fears that you're not good enough, you're not valuable. It feeds these fears. And so to cut it off at its source, but let it run its course, so you can examine what is truth and what is a lie. So that's what anxiety does. But there's the body response, right? Like, what does our body do when we're anxious? Well, some people get a headache. Maybe your vision feels blurry. Your throat feels choked up. Your chest feels tight. Your stomach feels tight. Your hands are sweating. Your hands feel numb. Your muscles feel tight. Your knees are shaking. Your feet are sweaty. I mean, so there is a physiological response. And this is very true of our kids, right? So with kids, I want to make sure I'm not skipping ahead here. But it's important to be able to recognize these signs, because it's important for us to teach them what is happening in their body. So with kids, anxiety looks like some of those that I just mentioned, but it also looks a lot like anger, or it can. It can look a lot like anger, because anger can be used to mask anxiety, because anger often makes us feel a false sense of control over an anxious situation. So if you see a child who is more aggressive, an increased need for control, provoking others, irritable, those might be signs of anxiety, apart from the things of like the stomach ache, the typical things that kids get sent to the nurse's office when they're experiencing anxiety. So it's important to be aware of what this looks like in the body so that we can respond to it. And saying like, take a deep breath, as cheesy as that sounds, I mean, what that's doing in your body is, it's slowing down your heart rate. It's decreasing your temperature. It's getting your brain the oxygen it needs to not hurt. And that's our body's response to dealing with some of these not functional symptoms we're having that look like anxiety. So if you see your child picking up their nails, picking up their lip, avoiding eye contact, hypervigilant, looking around, wanting to make sure that they're safe, if they're overly particular, or it's our job to recognize these signs so we can teach them what it means. Okay, so emotions for kids are whole body experiences, right? That's why your kid looks like a fish out of water when they're having a tantrum on the floor, because it's a whole, from their head to their toes, they're feeling it. Whatever it is, it's big, it's loud. And as we get older, I feel like we either get better at masking this for socially acceptable reasons, because we can't do that as adults, although I'm sure some days we want to have that kind of reaction, but it starts to become less of a body experience and more of a cognitive experience as we get older, right? So we learn how to be all in our head and not all in our body, but we can use this time when our kids are still feeling everything very deeply and very physically to identify it, to address it, and to teach them how to deal with it. So when kids are feeling any sort of feeling, it's hard for them to think straight, right? I'm sure you guys are vaguely familiar with the science of the brain, right? When you're in the back of your brain, it's hard to make decisions, and that's where our kids are. When they're on the floor, when they're anxious, when they're overly worried, we're back here, and to make rational decisions to the point where I can, evaluate risk, tell myself truths. You have to be able to be calm, right? You have to be able to use executive functioning skills, which is in the front of your head. So to be able to do both at once is very, very challenging, and not. So the order of things is feeling, coping, and then problem solving. And to expect our kids to jump from feeling to problem solving is nearly impossible. And so the centerpiece of coping, and that's what I'm going to jump into, is how do we teach that? How do we teach kids to cope before they can get to problem solving? Because you can't jump straight there. So, first of all, this is not new information to all of you, but we can't just say, be calm. Calm down. I don't know if your spouse has ever said that to you. Calm down. It's not an effective modality of coping. And in fact, it often makes us more frustrated. So in order to feel calm, you have to first teach what you're feeling now. Okay, we're moving them from point A to point B. And we'd love them to be at point B, which is calm. But they have to know what is point A, what is happening, whether it's anxiety, anger, disappointment, frustration, feeling overwhelmed. We have to help them identify that and know what to do with it next. So saying, don't be anxious, don't be angry, there's nothing to worry about, we're going to be fine, doesn't teach them how to deal with those feelings. Instead, that just teaches them these feelings are inconvenient to me, and so instead of listening to you or processing through it, I'd rather you just not feel this way. And that's us jumping to problem solving, right? Like, we know it's going to be okay. We know whatever the fear is that feels irrational to you is going to turn out fine. But we're not teaching them to deal with anxiety and to get to that point on their own. And that's really important. But that part is messy, right? Like, to sit in someone's feelings and not fix them and not make it better, it's uncomfortable because we'd rather just take it away so they don't feel that way. Sorry, excuse me. So if you have a child that says, I'm really worried about LEAP testing, and you respond with, you'll do great. Does that fix it? Does that make them less anxious? No, not necessarily. So to sit through, what are you worried about? What's the worst that could happen? Sure, that's a possibility. You could fail. What happens if they fail LEAP testing? Is that a magnet school thing? Was that a Louisiana? So nothing happens. You guys, the amount of kids in my office talking about LEAP testing. To the teachers. Okay. So your anxiety is rubbing off on the kids in my office? Is that what's happening? I get it, yeah. Goodness gracious. So saying you'll do great doesn't fix the problem. Okay, what are you scared of? What are you worried is going to happen? Well, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to make it to 5th grade. Well, that's a possibility, I guess. Maybe it's not. It sounds like it's not, but... And what would that mean? That I'm dumb. I'm an idiot. I can't do anything right. Well, is that true? Is that true? Let's think of some things that you are good at. Just because you're not good at reading or not good at this. You can do this really well. You build towers. You play game. Whatever it is that makes them smart. And so we can use our own truth. But the truth we can use is in Scripture, right? God tells us who we are and His. And we don't need to be smart and all those things. But we're still valuable. But to get to the bottom of, you'll do great, that doesn't alleviate anxiety. It just dismisses it. So the language is important. Sitting in the feeling. Naming the feeling. Lots of adults can't even do this. Name their feeling. Like what you expect something to be like and what it's actually like. In the middle of that is disappointment. And so when we have expectations for our children, and I ask parents, like, are you disappointed in your kid? Oh, gosh, no. I'm not disappointed in my kid. I love my kid. Okay, well, you're telling me you want them to be doing this, and they're doing this. And so the tension between that is disappointment. And you think they're not reading off on that? Like, kids know when we feel disappointed in what they're doing. And so to match our expectations with what they're capable of course we want more for our kids. Of course we want them to be successful. Of course we want them to grow. But to put the bar up here and have them constantly not hit it leads to them feeling like you're disappointed. So anyway, that's a caveat. But so when adults and kids, we don't know how to name our feeling. And even if we do, or if someone names it for us, we don't want to feel that way. Right? If I were to tell you you're sad, you're angry, you're disappointed, you're overwhelmed. We don't want to feel that way. It's not comfortable. So we'd like to skip over it most times. We don't know how to feel sad. We don't know how to feel anxious. We don't want to, so we develop unhealthy coping skills to distract ourselves and escape. But the way that naming our feeling helps us feel a sense of empowerment, of familiarity. You felt this way before. You can handle it. It gives our kids a sense of empowerment. So we can't go from feeling to problem solving. Again, our brain is not functioned to do that. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that Scripture commands us, don't be anxious about anything. So how does that fit into all this? Because anxiety is a human emotion, it serves a purpose, but Scripture calls us not to be anxious. So what does that mean? Do we think it means don't experience worry or don't evaluate risk? I really don't think it does. I think Scripture calls us to overcome anxiety in order to feel safe in the arms of Jesus. And if you read Scripture, and you think to yourself, if you read Scripture that says, don't be anxious about anything, and you think, I can't be anxious, I need to avoid it, I need to put these walls up and never feel worried, then you're not overcoming anxiety, you're just pretending it's not there. And so, how do you deal with it if you're pretending it's not there? If you don't deal with it, it will deal with you, right? And if you don't face it, it'll come out sideways. Which if our kids are constantly dismissed when they feel anxious, it does come out sideways. It does come out in breakdowns at night and when they're doing homework and things are so overwhelming, it comes out sideways. And if you don't face it head on, it'll come out sideways, especially in your parenting. Because we're not going to pretend that there's not a level of anxiety associated with raising children, especially these days when you've got the news and social media to tell you every bad thing that's ever happened to every kid in the whole world, right? Like, man, it just gives your head some ideas about what can happen. We've never had that before. So of course there's a level of anxiety associated with raising kids. There's an alarm in our brain that's purpose is to keep our kids safe. And do you think God's telling you, hey, there's nothing that can go wrong? That's false. God says everything can go wrong, but I've got you and I'm still good and you can trust me and you can give your worries to me. But we cannot give our anxiety to Christ if we do not acknowledge we're experiencing anxiety. And do you think it would be helpful if when Jesus was weeping about Lazarus to say, knock, knock, hey, Jesus, actually, I was just reading the fruits of the Spirit, and it says to be filled with joy. So if you could just knock it off, right? If you could just wipe those tears and give us a smile, that would make me more comfortable. No, that would not be helpful. And why? Why is that? Because without grief, we do not know joy. And without worry, without acknowledging our human worry, we do not know peace. Without acknowledging our worry, we do not know peace. And so it's important to note when Scripture says, do not fear, do not worry, do not be anxious about anything, it's because God is calling us into a peace. But we can't do that by going around anxiety or by shoving it down. We have to go through it. We have to overcome it. And to empower our kids and ourselves, we have to teach them how to cope. And so some practical tips. I know that's what everyone loves, the practical tips. I'd say the best parenting advice I've ever received is ask them, do you need me to listen? And marriage advice, to be honest. Do you need me to listen or do you need advice? Right? Because those are two totally different things. And if you've got older elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids, if you try that phrase, like 95% of the time, they're going to get, I just need you to listen. And then when they actually are in a place where maybe they'll take your advice, they'll ask for it. But you're giving them space to just say, do you need my advice or do you want me to just listen? And then they can learn how to work through their own emotions without your advice, right? Because you know how to fix their problems. You're not in the same state of anxiety. And so for them to reach that place, you might just need to say, hey, you need me to listen or do you need me to give advice? So with younger kids, to focus on what's going on inside their body. So taking deep breaths, explaining, how do you know you're worried? Because maybe they'll say that to you. And maybe with younger kids, they're not saying that yet, but when you got older kids, I'm feeling really anxious, or in the car on the way to school, the first day of school or first day of testing, oh, my stomach hurts. Oh, bud, yes. Sometimes your stomach hurts when you're feeling worried. You know why? Because your body's getting ready to fight. It's ready, it thinks there's danger out there, so it's ready to protect itself. And when our body's ready to protect itself, our muscles get tense, and our stomach is a muscle, and so it's contracting really hard because it's ready to protect you from danger. And so what are you worried about? What are you worried about happening? What's the risk? What's the worst that can happen? Because when your stomach feels like you're going to vomit everywhere, it's because it's geared up. It's geared up to fight. And explaining those things gives us a sense of, oh, I don't have the flu. I don't have COVID-19. I just feel worried about whatever's going on in math class or whatever it is. And so communicating what's happening in their body can give a sense of empowerment. And if you need to learn more about what that looks like, there's tons of resources. There's lots of visuals on the internet about what does that look like. I know with my kids, we'll trace out their body. Sometimes with my little, we'll trace out her body on the floor, and we say, what happens when you're mad? Well, your cheeks get red, your fists get tight, your heart rate increases. If you're anxious, your thoughts are spiraling around. And so some kids will draw their thoughts all messy like spaghetti, and their hands sweat. And the more you can help them recognize, oh, this is what my body does. Our body gives us clues into how we're feeling. Sometimes our body reacts before our brain even does. So helping them connect the dots can be really empowering. Okay, managing your own feelings so your children can tell you how they're feeling without worried about you worrying. That's a really hard one. That's a hard one for me. Because if your kid is worried about something, they're probably worried that you're going to be worried about it. And so another piece of parenting advice is don't react, right? Nothing is surprising. Nothing is too much. You just nod your head. Mm-hmm. Oh, they said that. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. You nod. And then if you need to process it later, if you need to cry later, if you need to call a friend later, then do that. But to be able to manage your own feelings, I mean, if we went, what? Are you kidding me? Then they're oh my goodness, yes, that is terrifying. We reinforce the anxiety they had by our reaction. So the more calm you can be, the more confident you are in managing your own feelings and reactions will certainly improve the situation. Okay, so I can give you all the practical tools in the world, but the biggest teacher, like Jason said, it's you guys, right? It's you being able to model how to handle your own anxiety, your own feelings, how to communicate your coping skills. My kids see this. If my kid's freaking out, they see me grab some water, and I'll just glug it around, because if I don't do that, I'm going to be yelling at somebody. It's going to be hard to remain calm. They see me turn on music. They see me sit down on the couch and say, I just need to take a break. They see me wrap myself up in a blanket. They see me hug my husband, right? Like, they see these things, and I can communicate, hey, this is really overwhelming to me. I'm just going to go in the other room for a minute, and I'll be right back. I'll be right with you. And I go in, and it's like, and then you come back in. You say, okay, I'm ready to roll. Like, let's try that again. I mean, you have to learn how to manage your own feelings, because we cannot ask of our kids what we're not willing to do ourselves, right? So if you don't know how to respond to anxiety, anger, frustration, stress, overwhelmed, we certainly cannot expect it from our kids. It will be very, very difficult for you to co-regulate your child's anxiety if you are feeling a heightened level of anxiety. They will sense it. They will sense that something is unsafe, because it's unsafe enough to stress you out. I mean, that's why all of our kids have a heightened sense of anxiety March last year, right? None of us knew what's going on. Like, what are we doing? And they feed off that. They get this sense, like, the world isn't safe. We need to be overly protective, because that's what we're doing, because we don't know what we're doing. So we're not, okay, I want to make sure I covered all my practical. Music, blankets, taking deep breaths, laying on the floor. Yes, that's what it looks like in my house. Lots of that. So creating a safe or calm space in your home. A lot of my coworkers have this. It's called the Calm Corner, I think it is. Is that right? They have visuals on their wall. They have some tools, some fidgets, some cushions. If there's a place in your home where you feel like this is where we go if we need a break. Now, if it's an older kid, if the room is a safe place and they tell you they need a break, then don't be personally offended by that. Right? If they tell you they need a break, I mean, they're utilizing a coping skill that we're teaching them. And often I see, I guess, with teenagers in my office, they say, I tell my parents I need a break, and the parents said, you will not take a break. You will sit right here and finish this conversation, which of course that becomes a power and control dynamic where someone's telling you they have a need to take a break. They're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, or it's not going to go well if we keep going like this. And then we force them to be in it, right? Because we want control of the situation. And so it's a hard dynamic to play of when do we utilize coping skills when they can take a break, and when do we force the issue. So it's important to acknowledge, this isn't a power struggle. It's about teaching our kids how to deal with how they're feeling. And if taking a break is what it looks like. So timeout in my house is not seen as a punishment, and there's research, timeouts, good or bad. In my home, it's not a punishment, right? It's an opportunity to take a breath. I time out from you, you time out from me, right? That's not like, and it's just a place with cushions and stuffed animals and a feelings chart. I think similar to the Calm Corner where, hey, why don't you just go over there and take a break, right? How are you feeling? How do we calm your body down? And it requires, I have a 3-year-old, there's a lot of co-regulation. And if I can't be calm, I can't co-regulate her. That's why it's important. Okay, also what's important is separating behaviors from feelings. So the feelings are acceptable. The behavior is not always acceptable, right? We can't tolerate hitting, breaking things. You can be mad. I can get that. You're mad. You can't hit, break things. So the longer pause you can give between that, I see you're mad. We're not going to break things, right? So we're acknowledging you. I hear you. I get you. And then with older kids, right, especially as they get smarter and smarter, too smart for their own good, it's not helpful to argue when they're this emotional. And we argue because we have the logical response, but we can't teach when kids are in that heightened sense of emotion, right? Again, they're back here in the back of their brain. They're not going to learn anything. Discipline, to discipline is to teach. And they can't learn anything in that heightened sense of emotion. So we have to be able to calm and then teach. And so if they're not calm, arguing with them, teaching some sense into them, telling them why they're wrong, telling them why that's not going to work out, telling them why you shouldn't be worried about that, they're not going to hear you. They're too heightened, and it's not helpful. So you can reflect back what they're feeling, empathize to a point where you genuinely understand what they're upset about. We cannot teach them till they're calm. That's how the brain works. So when you have to get to a point where you can genuinely understand what they're anxious about, angry about, and if you can't get there, it's going to be very hard to teach them because you don't understand them, and they get that. You don't understand what I'm upset about. Well, sure, my daughter's worried that Godzilla is going to come tonight. I can understand how if you thought that would be very scary. Right, I know that's not going to happen, but I'm not going to start there. I'm not going to say, no, that's not going to happen. Because then she says, no, you don't understand. Godzilla is coming. Well, sure, if you believed that, that would be really scary. I get it. Like, we're not arguing. We're on the same page. Yes, scary. And I'm here to then, okay, she hears me. There's more sense of calm, more sense of open to understanding the logical perspective after that. Okay, here's some things to avoid when you're dealing with anxiety. Giving kids extra reassurance that may make them feel better initially, but actually feeds the anxiety in the long term and creates a dependence on this reassurance, right? So if we tell them over and over and over again, then they start looking to you like, am I going to be okay? Right? It's the kid at the playground that's like, am I good? Am I good? Am I good? Yeah, go. Yeah, go. Like, they look for our reassurance. They're looking over their shoulder to make sure they're still safe instead of saying, no, do you think you're okay? Right, you get to decide. You get to feel empowered in determining your own level of anxiety here. Okay, kids that repeatedly ask questions about what's going to happen. My advice on this one is to provide a clear answer one time, ask if they have any additional questions, and move on so you don't feed their anxiety. And if they ask you again, say, buddy, dear, I answered that, and I'm only going to answer it once, okay? And just say it, right? You already gave an answer. And so when you answer it over and over, they ask the next morning, hey, we answered that yesterday? We answered that yesterday. Okay, move on, right? Like, because it's the same as the reassurance. If you've answered the question, you've answered it clearly. Now, if you feel like you haven't answered it, sure, go back and do it again. But if you've answered it clearly, they know. Like, unless they really genuinely forgot, then maybe write it down. So that you could say, oh, why don't you take a look at that paper we wrote, right? We wrote what's going to happen, and so go ahead and refer to that. Because when they reference or when they need reassurance from you, it's exhausting for you, first of all. Like, okay, how many times are you going to ask about this, right? But then it creates a dependence on you to alleviate their anxiety. Okay, doing things for a child that they can do on their own that does not allow them the chance to develop independence. Okay, allow kids to sit with their discomfort. And then if a child demands something to be a certain way, like asking for a specific colored cup, if you have any toddlers, you may know this argument. They want the pink plate, whatever it is. Giving into these requests makes the need for these requests stronger. And then language for responding to anxiety. Instead of, you don't need to be scared, you'll be safe with your mask on. This is a COVID reference, I guess, is when I wrote this. Instead of saying, don't be scared, you'll have your mask on, you'll be totally safe, just say, man, it has been a different year, hasn't it? Right? It's been a different year, and it's been different to wear masks and stay at home. What helps you feel safe? What helps you feel safe when you're feeling scared? Well, washing my hands, staying away from people, that's what makes them feel safe. Well, great, then that's what we'll do. Does that sound good? That's what makes you feel safe, then that's what we'll do. Okay, it allows them some autonomy, it allows them some input that they contribute to the problem solving. So it's not you telling them what makes them feel safe, it's them deciding what makes them feel safe. So that when they do it, they actually feel safe, and not just because you told them to. Instead of, okay, I see you're scared, I'm going to stand right here so you don't feel safe. Try saying, it looks like you're feeling nervous about being by yourself, right? So what helps your body feel calm when you're nervous? This avoids you solving the problem for them and stops you from rescuing them, but it doesn't allow them to be totally alone and helpless. So this isn't like, oh, you're afraid to be in your room? Bye. Like, good luck, figure it out, right? Like, we're not putting these kids in this situation of discomfort where they truly are alone and can't handle it. We're just saying, you're not saying, I'll stand right with you. You'll say, what's going to help you feel calm? Right? I'm here. I'm here to help you solve this problem, but what's going to help you do it? And have them come up with something that's going to make them feel safe. Okay, if they're nervous about being dropped off at a camp or something new, instead of saying, you've been to this camp before and you always have so much fun. Okay, again, that sounds like a nice thing to say. You've been here. That's a logical response. You've been here. It's so much fun. Every time I pick you up, you don't want to leave. That's a logical response. But instead of saying that when they're nervous about being dropped off, you can say, it's hard to say goodbye and to be in a different place. And it's okay to be sad or nervous. Any ideas on what you'll do when you get there to help yourself adjust? Right, well, I do have a friend or I do have a teacher. So this kind of language, this kind of not telling them the logical response, but asking for it can help them generate it themselves and help themselves feel more empowered to deal with the anxiety instead of you just placing the correct answer in their head. Okay? So I think that's all I have. I don't even know how much time I've been up here, but my email is on the Clinton Davis Counseling website. If you have any specific questions about your kid, I know we're doing a Q&A on Sunday as well, but I'd be happy to walk through any situation, any particular situation that comes to mind. If you ever want to schedule an appointment, I meet with parents to talk about consulting and what their kid's going through too. If you just need to meet one time, I'm happy to do that as well. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see y'all Sunday too. So thanks.